Hi everyone, it's Erkan Ali here from Business Bold. This is our new podcast, and this is our first of hopefully very many. I'd like to welcome David Sherman, a very good friend of mine, former mentor, and an outright inspiration to me for a few decades now. So, David, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Erkan. It's a pleasure always to see you, speak with you, and to support this new. It's great to have you back.
Yeah,
You haven't done this for a while,
I haven't done
so
this for
it's
quite a
great.
while, and the last one we did was banned on YouTube, David.
Yes, that's a badge of honor, I think.
Well, if you're not on a list somewhere, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, exactly,
So,
exactly.
So just to orientate, I mean, I'm in North Cyprus. Uh, this is a temporary background that I've used for today's session. We'll see what we do later. And David, where are you? Where are you right now? Where are you?
I'm in Alberta, Canada, with the rest of the G7 leaders. Haha.
Did they invite you?
I'm still waiting for my invite, mate.
No, I don't know. You'd shake it up, I'm sure. So what we want
Yeah.
to do is, I think what I'd like to do on this show is just get into maybe what we're thinking about. I mean, that's the thing. What I've found was I've gone from doing many different types of shows, different subjects and different contexts. And this is under the guise of engaged business consulting and business bold. But what the strap line for business bold is bold in business and life. And I think we're
Mm.
now well, we've just seen all that's going on in Iran and Israel. We've been seeing the things going on with Gaza. We've seen what's happening in Ukraine. UK's left the Europe. I know that maybe doesn't impact you so much personally, but big changes. We've had COVID era. Where do we find? It's like being spat out of a storm, and you've been spat out onto the shore, and you shake yourself and you think, where am I now? What am I thinking about? And I want to pose that question to you. I mean, what are the things that are on your mind? I've got an idea of some of the work you've been doing recently. I don't know where you'd want to start, but when you look out at the world as a man at the stage we are in our lives, what are you thinking about?
Wow. Ken, as ever, a challenging, confronting question, not one that can be, I think, easily or simply answered. Because to some degree, we are, two people get together, some skin gets rubbed, and you get a ticket into the game called life, right? And you're
Uh,
kind of thrown thrown into the river of life. And you can either go with the flow, and for many years, I think I did just go with the flow, and then for whatever reason, was able to not go with the flow. And kind of a process of waking up, seeing what I'd never seen before, the seeing of which made a difference to my life, which I think is really important. If you kind of unconsciously be who you've always been, you're going to do what you've always done and have what you always had. And for whatever reason, uh, you know, certain opportunities came into my life that allowed me to work on being someone I'd never been before in order to do what I'd never done before, in order to have or experience what I'd never had before. And life still lifes as we go on. And now, at nearly 67 years of age, which for me, look, it's not necessarily a huge number, but in my life, and after experiencing my father dying at 46, to be now nearly 67 is kind of, I don't want to call it a miracle. It's just unusual. Like I never expected it. And
Well,
there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
I suppose your father died at that age, and when you juxtapose that against where you are now, you've broken the ceiling of your part.
Yeah, for many years
Yeah,
now,
yeah, many
and
years.
have the wonderful experience of having children and now grandchildren. And, they always say, wisdom comes with age, but, it does. You can't avoid that. And, I also think, look, there's so much in the world that you and I have no control over,
Mm.
right? Things happen on a global stage. We don't have any control over those things. Doesn't matter what they are, whether it be war or pandemics or whatever, or economic challenges. But we always have a control over how we feel about those things. We have control over our emotions. We have control over what we do, and what we think. And so when I look out at the world right now, on one hand, I'm kind of sad, a bit disgusted, you know, um, a bit resigned. But on the other side, on the other hand, because we're not just one dimensional beings, we have all these myriad of feelings. On the other side, I feel kind of hopeful. It's like I know we are more than just our physical bodies. And whilst there's this sort of third dimensional suffering going on, war and, all the terrible things that are happening in the world, I do think we are where we're supposed to be. And I think we're closer now to an enlightened, wonderful breakthrough. Before a breakthrough, there's always a breakdown. And there's lots of
And
breakdowns in the
there's
world right
lots of
now, but
breakdowns. I,
yeah, that just means there's going to be lots of breakthroughs.
I'd like to go back a bit, just rewind, because
Yeah,
it was a.
please.
I just realised how deep that question was, and I'm thinking, is this where we want the show to go? And I think it's going to go where it goes. But just this talk of going with the flow, or like in your earlier days, you said I just went along with the flow, and I think that was for me a bit like you go along to get along. You just kind of don't overly question, you don't challenge the paradigms that we're living in. We just want to, in that survivalistic success story. And I guess, probably a lot of our work in life, and obviously for you being a touch older than me, there's that yuppie time of making money and living fast. And, there was a time in our lives where we just wanted the rewards of our efforts and we wanted to enjoy them.
Yes.
Like a party like it's 1999 type things. And I guess that there's that, and I still see people living like that. Still chasing the cars, still want the bigger house. And I think a lot of, I don't know if this is true. In my experience, I meet a lot of business owners, and working with them is to make their businesses more successful. And I always ask them, well, what more do you want? You got a home, you got running water, you got food in the cupboards, you got clothes in your wardrobe. You got all the things that anyone, that I don't know, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've got it all already. What more do you want? Where is it that you're not fulfilled? What do you think? What do you think is going to make you happier? Another Porsche, another holiday, another. What, I mean, there's no end to that.
Mm,
I think
mm.
although people kind of go, yeah, I know that's going on over there, and I know that's going on over there, but I just don't know. They're on this success materialistic journey. Is that what you meant by going with the flow?
I think to some degree, given, so everybody's born into a slightly different, they different culture, different religion, different story. I was born into the Jewish religion, Jewish culture, Jewish, sort of place in London, people, and inside of that culture, it was quite materialistic, and you were expected to work hard and get things. And, in my life, I'm no stranger to hard work. I don't think I've got a chip on my shoulder. I'm not, I don't walk through life expecting, right? And I worked hard and I chased the dream. Wasn't necessarily my dream, but, the dream I inherited. you know, and did the best I could inside of that kind of context and that kind of paradigm. And, I'm not saying it was bad. I did lots of great things, had material success. I think there was also a lack of, and I'll say this for myself, a lack of appreciation of those things that are different now. I'm much more appreciative of quality versus quantity. Doesn't mean that quantity is not important, but quality over quantity. But that came later in life. So I think you start off in life in the, you're born into something. You get conditioned, right, and you're in that. And for whatever reason, some of us And I'm not, and there's no criticism of people who don't break out of that conditioning, but clearly some people break out of their conditioning, and then there's something else that's available, and some people stay in that conditioning all the time, and you see that everywhere, and I think that also impacts the motivation of certain business owners. So, as someone that's worked in the world of consulting for many, many years, you can see that when you're working with clients. What is their true, what is their motivation? Is their motivation something they've just inherited and the motivations come out of that? Or is their motivation because they've broken out of what they've inherited and they see something else, and there's something else driving them that is causing them to, you know do things and be things. So, I think it's interesting because I think we live in a very, very, very interesting time, and you never know as you run into new clients or you meet new people, it quite where they're at the beginning. And I think as a consultant, it's very, very important this day and age to create a connection
Mm.
with people, way more so than it was, you know, 25 years ago. It didn't matter, you know. Now, I think connection is really important.
I think I
Yeah.
agree with that, and I'd say what I'd add to that is it's not just connections. I'm quite weary what I reveal about me early on as well.
Mm.
Like my personal persona as opposed to my professional persona, because I think what I've realised is how fragmented. In the old days there was the lefties and the righties and the hippies. It was like kind of solid, clear groups, and now it's like everything everywhere. You really don't know where anyone
Yes.
is on the curve on any subject until you start talking,
Yes.
and you could easily step on a landmine, or you could say something that makes someone go, "Where'd you get that?" Like straight away you've caused some kind of offence because we're so information's coming from everywhere. You don't know what people are watching, what they're immersing themselves with. You can't take anything for granted. I know that's probably very obvious anyway, but even people are traveling. They're coming from different cultures. I'll say something. I mean, especially here in North Cyprus, I'll say something that's very just the normal thing to say, and they really don't understand what I'm talking about sometimes.
Mm.
So I think we are. I'm talking about in the space of consulting and that interference that consultancy is, because obviously you're there to impact the situation, and the idea is what tool do you pick up to make that impact. Is
Yes, I mean, very much so. You're trying, well, I'm not going to say all consultants do that, but you and I do. You and I are trying to create opportunities for people to see things they've never seen before,
yeah,
the
and then
seeing of which makes a difference to them.
yeah, and how far can how? I mean, that's on us. How far are you going to open that window? Because I sometimes say to people, look, it's like putting you on the treadmill in the gym. I can press the button, and suddenly you're doing 10 kilometers. But can you keep up with that? I need to,
Yes.
and I've done it before. I mean, I'm sure with experience you've kind of overdone it, and then you know you could have gone further, and that's experience building and the nuances of that. But the thing is like, are we still taking them where they want to go? Are we trying to say these things are important as well?
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think there's also people are and have been, I would say, over the last 5 years, and they're either conscious to this or not. They are very their triggers are close to the surface.
Mm,
So it's easy to trigger someone because they've been conditioned by the messages they're receiving from media, from other people, or even like subliminal messages. And, they kind of walk around with hair triggers and very easily triggered, very easily offended, very easily, emotional outbursts. Because I think a lot of people walk around with a lot of fear. There's lots of uncertainty out there. There's insecurities out there. So, all of that has an impact on people. And particularly, in business, people maybe even more so in business because people have got more to lose. I'm not really sure about that. You could say the entrepreneurs of this world, yes, they've got more to lose, but they're also maybe a little thicker skin
Mm.
because that's what makes them entrepreneurs in the first place. You can't, the world of, whether or not you could ever put people all in the same box, but the people are in very, very different boxes, very different silos. There seems to be way more boxes that have been created. And maybe you could say, well, the strategy behind that is if we can put people in more boxes, then there's more separation.
Mm.
And the evil forces want us to be as separate as possible. So
Yeah.
we're going to use everything to separate people.
No, and I completely. I mean, look, if we've even as a society been arguing over gender in a way that I never
Yes,
imagined. I never imagined that we'd have these arguments about all the different gender profiles, and
exactly.
men identifying as women. I don't want to get into that subject specifically, but
No, no,
the
but
levels
I
of
mean, 10
division
years ago, 10
you
years ago,
wouldn't
a
even.
lot of the conversations we're in today just didn't
They
exist.
didn't exist.
Where did they come from?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. That would be a different program, I think. But yeah,
Yeah.
how do we view entrepreneurship today? I mean, I think entrepreneurship, if you look at the 80s and, like the kind of, the era of pick, um, the era of the first mobile phones and then,
Or Wolf of Wall Street,
yeah, that's
greed is good,
we
lunch is for
agreed.
wimps.
Yeah, lunches for whims, and you do whatever it takes. It's like there's nothing is unacceptable. But it's business. It's not personal. It's business. And I didn't grow up with that. I mean, I grew up with it's personal. You stand by your word. You do your best. You own your mistakes because we all make them, and you do your best to support people and move the situation forward. But I think this, when you look at it, I don't know. When you look at it globally, everybody's, different cultures are at different rates of that, different stages.
Yeah.
You look at the consciousness scales, we are at different places. Everybody's in a different place. There's not, I don't think there's a shared common human experience as I would have thought there was maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think that the world moves at such a fast pace this day and age. You know, what used to take a year can be done in a week.
Right.
What used to take a week can be done in seconds, right? So there's that. There's good side to that, and there's a challenging side to that. I think to this day and age, um, any entrepreneur of any value is looking to make a difference. They're looking to either disrupt an industry and take it out of the sort of stone age and bring it into the 21st century and make it more integrous and higher value, or they're creating something that has never been created before because AI makes it available, technology makes it available. So, it's kind of really creative as well. And what's the driving force behind a business? I don't think in this day and age it's only solely and only the bottom line.
No.
I don't think that's there at all. I think there's much more worthy reasons. Yes, of course, it's got to make money. I mean, for instance, the work that I do here in Canada with the First Nations or Indigenous population. Yeah, I mean, any business that's worth its salt makes money. It doesn't have integrity if it doesn't. It's not charity. But the driving factor behind that is to make a difference. And to offer healing and empowerment in a way that it hasn't been offered to that community before, that has them, not everybody in that community, but there's a large percentage of the population that are kind of stuck in what is called generational trauma and, the horrors passed down from one generation to another. So, and I think that's the same in lots of businesses. What is your reason for being, your raison d'etre? It's not just about making money, you know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, no. Well, I'm kind of. I feel I'm going to have to edit this bit out. I'm like, I kind of like. I'm thinking that we're looking at the world. We want to be successful in any of our, as individuals. We want to be successful what we're in. However, there seems to be so many left behind that you like the ratio of how much more you have to put in to be successful seems to be more and more. And then I'm looking. I was just, where I went. I went to the next generation. Not even our, our children's generation have grown up with the digital world, with the devices. Living life, 7 inches
Mm,
places.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and what world are they going to move into? Where are they going to make that mark? How much of the conditioning has already set fate
mm,
respect
mm.
in terms of the education and what's expected of them? I mean, in our setup meeting, we was talking about the work you were doing with the indigenous populations, and some of the situations are really difficult, very difficult. Um,
Well, they are. I mean, they're difficult because they're a function of an outcome of a certain strategy. So when human beings are seen as a problem to solve, that's not going to end well, right? But I think that if we just look at the human culture just as a whole for a moment, I think for many, many years we have all been dumbed down.
mm,
We've been dumbed down by education. We've been dumbed down by, sort of the general most popular beliefs. We've been dumbed down by technology as a huge one, right? And I do think in the last 5 years, whilst a lot of dumbing down has gone on, and we don't really need to get into, media and, messaging and all of that. But at the same time, that's also woken people up, and I'm a great, great believer in developing people's intuition. I
mm,
think intuition is something that we're all born with, but like anything, it needs to be developed so it can be strong. And if you develop a strong intuition and you trust your intuition is never wrong, never wrong. Um, and I also think that you can combine a strong intuition with technology, for instance. So we all start to wake up. We use technology or AI. There's a very positive side to that, which allows for us to have this sort of dance with our intuition, our higher self, and technology. And of course, there's a dark side to it. Just like money can be used for good and money can be used for bad. It's
mm,
it's where you're at as a person. A lot of people walk through life concerned about what they think other people think of them. For instance, if you're connected to yourself and you're connected to your purpose, and your purpose is um, one of an integrous purpose. You're not out to do any harm. You don't need to have any concern about what other people think. It's none of your business, right? So you can just go through life, and so therefore, I think we're living in a really exciting time. Yes, there's all this terrible stuff happening around us, but actually, on the sort of growth cycle of humanity, maybe we need to just go through this,
mm,
to come out the other side a little bit more connected to our intuition, a little bit more connected as people, just connected. And I've kind of, in a way, I've learnt that from indigenous history and culture, that back in the day before first contact, these people were very connected. They were
mm,
connected to what they call the creator, their God, right? They were connected to the land. They were
mm,
connected to animals. They had a very hard life, but they had this amazing connection to nature and to natural medicines, and that we could all do with now. I think the whole of humanity could do with that, right? So it being stolen from them, I think it was stolen from all of us. And so, when if we build connection, if you're an entrepreneur, how's your connection to your marketplace? How's your connection to your team? You know, are you connected or do you just drive them? Right? Not like a command and control, because I think that we've gone past that style of management. But, do you operate from a connected place?
That's a good lesson
And
for entrepreneurs or business owners. Are you connected with your people? I mean, quite often I hear business owners say we're like and you know what? A small business or an SME is like a family. You know,
yeah,
people have off days because they're sick. People know that people's friends, there's weddings in the pipeline, there's funerals that happened, or there's birthdays on the way. And we are in small in those smaller type businesses, and probably in bigger type businesses where there's smaller groups contained in them. People are involved with each other's lives, and I think that connection beyond exploitation, beyond just getting what I want out of that person, whether it's get this signed, get that done, whatever, is there is a human being.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that is something that we can all forget sometimes. When the waiter brings you your food cold, do you think, oh, this is a human being serving me, or do you kind of go, do we just go into reactive mode and disconnect because of some trigger or some kind of unfulfilled expectation that didn't meet your needs, and we just lose the humanity. I mean,
Well, I think also the connection goes here as well. How connected are you to yourself?
hmm,
Right? Because, so many people are in reactive mode. They react to political messages, they react to health messages, they react to economic messages. But actually, you know, to be in a reactive state all the time is like being a plastic bag just blowing in the wind. It's really hard. Whereas if you're really connected to your emotions, you're connected to your heart, you're connected to your feelings, you are not your feelings, but you are connected to them. You then have a degree of, I think, it's just being grounded, and not being reactive to all the stimulus that you're getting from the TV or your computer or your phone or, whatever. Because there's all this stimulus coming at us at a million miles an hour from many, many different directions. And so if you practice being connected to yourself, I think that's because to the degree that you are not connected to yourself is to the degree that you cannot connect to others.
so on that note, I mean, what would you cite as a very effective way of being connected? I mean, I know people who meditate, people who spend time in nature, but what kind of helps you get there? Is it managing your own internal conversation? I mean, I'm sure there's many.
Yeah, it's many things. I think we all went down the road of meditation is the answer, and there's nothing wrong with meditation at all. For us, people, it's a challenge because there is this sort of monkey mind, and some of us have practiced meditation and failed, or gone and done a Vipassana 10-day meditation, and I kind of lost my mind during that experience. It's not easy. I don't think it's about necessarily being silent. There's nothing wrong with that. But being, connected to your feelings, like, how do you feel today? How do I feel today? How do I feel about that? Um, you know, I think that's the one of the best questions you can ask yourself, with the understanding that you don't necessarily buy your first answer. And the reason I say that is, you know, who's the person you lie to the most in life? Now, everybody knows the answer to that. I've asked it a million times to thousands of people. Everybody knows the answer was myself. And okay, that's fine. But knowing that makes absolutely no difference, because the lies that you tell yourself that you can see is a lie has no impact. It makes no difference, because the purpose of a lie is to cover up the truth. So those ones you don't have to worry about. It's the lies that you believe are the truth that are really the important ones. How do you see through those veils? How do you see through that camouflage? And in my And certainly in the last 20 plus years, um, becoming intimately connected with what I call my internal terrorist, right? That hidden saboteur that's in here that feeds me propaganda, that listens to something on the news, and it hears that in a way, oh, I can use that to sabotage this person, right? Because I kind of look at it as a separate part of me, a dark part of me. It's not a bad part. It's in there. It's in everybody,
It's
and we
part
can
of the
see
mix.
it play out in all its glory right now, right? But it's like become intimately connected with that part, so you have freedom. And the reason I call it an internal terrorist is because the terrorist is the right word for it, because it's kind of hidden. It's camouflaged. It's in there, but it's really, really well hidden. It doesn't care, what it hurts or who it hurts, and it's kind of operates sometimes as like I'm on your side. That those moments in life where your higher self is telling you to act, and your internal terrorist is saying, "Don't you dare." We've all been there, right? And then afterwards, you regret it, right? So, it's about having a relationship with that part of yourself that is based on connection, based on love. Don't make it wrong. Really listen to it, and see if you can separate your higher self, which is where your intuition is, from your lower self, which is where your internal terrorist lives. Right?
Mm.
Um, you know,
I
yeah,
mean, one of the things I said about the show, or a little description, is like, authenticity creates breakthrough. And I think
yeah,
if we're willing and courageous enough and vulnerable enough, because sometimes you can't always get there on your own. Sometimes you've got to bounce it off, hear the echo come back, whether that's through your relationships, your friendships, or it could be just a stranger somewhere just say something, and you go, I mean, for me, getting connected to myself has been, I don't know, I've had various, some of it I've not liked. I've not wanted to get
yeah,
that close,
yeah,
who I consider, in the lies of all of that, and I found nature to be a massive, massive ally. The beaches and the sea, getting into nature and hearing the call of nature, like I'd tell you what, I was working with a very high end audio company back in Switzerland a while back, and we was at the Munich high end show, which is where million plus sound systems are, and we were at dinner, and I said, what, I think you guys should just open the window and listen to the birds singing.
I love it. I love
I
it.
thought I'm going to get fired in a minute, because because it's like it's like an endless quest to get to what is what authentic real world life, and that's nature. You can't get closer than that, and everything's going through some kind of filter. We have a behavioral value, if you like, of what we're dealing with, but there's something about hearing the sea lapping the shore, or hearing the birds,
Yes,
or hearing the wind,
yes,
rustling the leaves, that's very, one, it's acoustically incredible because it's source
yes,
straight. So
yes,
going back to the audio example, and we're always trying to get closer and closer to authenticity, and it's just almost, again, you said it's not in silence, but it doesn't have to be silent, because nature sometimes isn't. The wind.
yeah.
Where was I yesterday? I was up in the mountains on the south side of Cyprus, Trodos Mountains, and the skies opened up, the clouds opened, and this downpour came, and we're in the middle of having a barbecue, and this, like torrential rain up in the mountain, and I just sat there, and I was like, I don't know, it sounds so corny now. I just felt like one with nature, like one with
That's
nature.
beautiful.
It
Yeah.
was just like, what? It's just, there was a line I used to hear said that it's a place from when one can't speak. Is that?
Yes, when one cannot speak, one must be silent, something like that. It's from some philosopher. But I think, Ken, you're right on the money there. It's not like you want to spend your whole life like that, but you want to have the ability to connect to nature like that, because we are from nature. We're
Mm,
part of nature. And I think part of the world's problems is the separation that's been created and been forced upon us,
Mm. Well,
and
I mean, and we're in such a metaverse, we're in this digital bubble,
yeah,
or what is it, a bubble? It's
yeah,
like this immersion of digital stimulus, if you like, and it's like
yeah.
it's just that quiet mind, that opportunity, it's all going on and nothing. You're doing nothing. You're just there. And I guess one of the things that drives entrepreneurs and going back to your business owners is that constant stimulus of fight or flight, reacting to situations, coming in, saving the day or crisis, that up and down. And I think when you,
Firefighting.
yeah, there's a,
Yeah, yeah. You go from one breakdown to the next breakdown to the next breakdown. So you end up kind of living naturally in breakdown mode, which is not really, we're more creative beings, and we want to develop a way of being that has us live in breakthrough mode all the time. And I think that let's call it your internal terrorist or whatever, it has us live in scarcity, in uncertainty, in breakdown mode. And when we live in those things, it's almost like it's easier for outside forces to control us. Now, people listening to this can do whatever they want with that comment, because it's kind of a diverse, it's kind of a out there comment. But, you know, if you just look, you can see the control mechanisms that are out there. Right now, and personally, I think there are more and more people um, not willing to be controlled. But if you look at human history, control is a major part of how we've developed. And in being controlled, we have relinquished certain skills and certain power, intuition being one of them, self determination being another, being autonomous, and yet at the same time connected to the greater, not the greater good, but just being connected. I mean, it's been proven now scientifically that we are all connected, on a micro level. We are just one big organism, but over the huge amount of time that human beings have been around, somehow we've become more and more and more separate. And I think that being connected is immensely powerful. It gives rewards that are way beyond money or
mm,
possessions,
mm,
in terms of quality. I'm not saying money and possessions aren't important. They are. You want a quality of life, but they're not the only qualities that are available. And therefore, being in business in this day and age requires you to connect to some of those things that maybe being in business 30 years ago didn't require you to connect to,
no, I'd
and
agree with
that's
that.
the difference.
I'd agree with
Yeah.
that. It just reminded me, a friend of mine went to a networking meeting in London. He's based here and he travels a bit. And they asked him, "What race are you?" And he said, "The human race." And I thought, wow, good for you, because
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He just said, "Well, the human race." It was almost like a moment of genius. I thought that's actually that's a great answer. But I guess the answer was in the question. If they said, "What nationality are you?" He might have said something different. But they asked him what race
But
is.
it's an interesting, where did any of those people who are holding that meeting come up with that question? But why would you even come up with that question if you're holding a networking meeting? It's just like
Like, yeah.
it points to something, doesn't it?
It
That
does.
that
It does.
question was even there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing, I mean, I was looking at a video talk I did in 2018. It was a time when I had a breakdown, and I shared that about, what, it was during the B collaboration days, and I wanted to make, this big impact on the planet, and we've seen that, this coming from a shared experience that we had about making a difference and wanting to make an impact on the world. I'd spent many years of my life working on that, and then I realised that we make the impact where we are. Are you still experiencing making an impact, making a difference? And how do you see it? Do you see it going beyond you? Does it ripple out, or do you kind of send it off on its way and wherever it ends up, it ends up? I mean,
Yeah, and look, that's a very interesting question because I never set out in life to make a difference. Um, and it really wasn't until, for whatever reason, I stumbled across, you know, landmark education, the forum, I'm sure as many people did who are watching this and listening to this. And whilst I would acknowledge Landmark and give credit to Landmark for technologies that open doors, put it that way, it still requires the person to walk through the door. So I'm very clear about what I brought to the party and what it took from me to expand my consciousness, for want of a better way of saying it. And it was only until that happened that I found a home in making a difference. Let's put it that I've never said it quite like that, but you know, and then so there's this new reason for being, making a difference, that does knock up against my old personality of one that got conditioned based upon where I was born, the religion, the family, the experiences, etc. Those two things didn't always go hand in glove,
mm,
right? Um, but I think now for 35 years, I would say the very large part of my reason for being has been making a contribution, and at certain times that contribution is bigger than others. And if you had said to me 10 years ago that I would be, running a company in Canada serving Indigenous people, I could never have seen that on the horizon, never in a million years. And yet, actually, that's something I really love about my life, has been the unpredictable nature of it. And I think when you're into the type of work that we're into, expanding yourself, you are operating outside of what's predictable.
uh,
So here I
um,
am,
yeah, unpredictable.
right, at 66 years old, serving an indigenous population, which, you can't just walk in to do that. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to have an understanding and an empathy for what's happened. And then you've got to spend time building relationships and building trust and being invited in to the community. And so, yeah, very much I feel as inspired today as I was when I led the forum. It's completely different. The world's completely different. So much is completely different, but the inspiration is the same. And I was in a retreat last week, and I really had this experience like I'm at home here. But I can't say like that's what I was born to do. No, that's what I have developed myself to do. And there's a match between the sort of connection to a higher self spiritually and what I'm doing. And I think if entrepreneurs can get that type of connection and that type of inspiration, then they know they're on the right track. And it's not something that I need to drive. It's something that unfolds, you know. And that's very much, it's interesting. I'm working with a group right now who is trying to do something that's never been done before in the construction market. And the construction market is you know, particularly in England, it's kind of a dinosaur,
Mm.
of old boys club, and we're trying to do something that elevates the integrity of the industry, that lowers the bottom line unit cost of construction, but increases the quality of construction, and doing it without any overheads and using independent industry experts in a way that is a construction uh, collaboration or a construction consortium. And it's really interesting, the shift in mindset and the shift in being. You know, that we are one for all and all for one versus I'm out for me.
Mm.
And, are there some backhanders I can get, and, whatever I can get for myself, and who cares about the client? Nobody. They've got deep pockets, so it doesn't matter. It's a very interesting thing. So I feel, as I don't always, I've always felt that I'm kind of where I need to be and should be, but I feel that very strongly, like a 10 out of 10 right now. Whereas sometimes that drops down to like a 6 or a 5, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Um, no, fantastic, fantastic. Listen, just checking, doing a little time check.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We are 40 minutes in.
yeah.
I'd say we've got another 5 minutes and then we'll sign off. What other, I mean, what would you say to maybe somebody in business right now that is looking at the world, is looking at all these changes, is thinking to themselves, where do we go from here? I mean, what are the
Mm.
things to be looking out
Well,
for?
there's so much that's out of our control. We have no control over war and peace. We have no control over tariffs. We have no control over interest rates. There's so much we don't have control over. And how do you be okay with no control?
Mm,
You've got to find a way to not let that stress you out. Don't sweat over stuff that you've got no control over. Look for the things that you have control over, and make sure that that control is not force or domination. It's not efforting and stressful. And look for where there's flow. Where is your strategy flowing? Like, that's the right strategy. Do not underestimate the importance of culture in your organization. It's such an important thing. Do you have a culture that's fit for purpose? Or is it just something that is just organically developed, and therefore it's got a whole bunch of stuff in it that isn't really going to serve you? you know don't play lip service to your vision, your mission, your values, and your operating principles and policies. Do yourself a favor, and make sure all of that foundational work is done with integrity, is done with heart. Because that's, for me, that's what a business lives or dies on. you
mm.
know
Couldn't have,
um
I couldn't have. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're spot on, man. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great insight, and invariably with smaller businesses, it's something that's not really, it's not managed in a very, in a very conscious way. There's culture to a degree because there's certain expectations and people expect certain things to be done a certain way, and this is how we do it. But it's not a managed process on the whole. I find with SMEs, it's kind of like personality driven. And
yeah, 100%.
it's not like we've set this stall out and now we're working towards that. It's like, especially generation, and also I've seen it in businesses that have been around for a number of decades where the old crew have left and the new crew have come. Somehow the old ways of seeing it are still there. You think, how could they survive? But that shows you the
They've
strength.
well, they've inherited,
Yeah,
they've been passed on.
yeah,
And what dad or granddad did in dad or granddad's time can no longer work today.
no, it does not
And
work.
that's a challenging transition, but it's a transition that needs to be managed consciously, as you say, um, for the business to continue to evolve. And that's what it means. For me, evolve is a really important word. Are we evolving as people? Is your business evolving as it moves forward? Or is it just, meeting its targets? There's a difference.
Yeah.
between evolution and, yeah, we're meeting our targets or we're not meeting our targets, and be, whatever. But, are you consciously looking at how you are evolving? And I think that's something that, I don't care if you're in business or not, we should be looking at as a species. Are we evolving, or are we just revolving and spinning our wheels?
Yeah. And on
And
that,
in some, you look out there, yes, clearly we're spinning our wheels in certain
the wheels have
places.
fallen off, mate. They're rolling down the hill.
Yeah.
David, I want to thank you for taking the time for coming into this first of many podcasts for Business Bold. I want to thank the audience. Please share it wide. Feedback. Let us know what you liked, what you think, other subjects that we could talk about. And if you want to be on the show, you're a past guest of mine, get in touch, and we'll schedule a time for you to come and join me. David, any last words before we sign off?
Ken, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you. We're birds of a feather, brother from another mother, however you want to say it. Two different parts of the world. We've known each other, I don't know, 20 plus years,
Mm.
and there's always been a connection. And I treasure that, and, whilst this is the first time we've done this in a long, long time, it's fun. And I hope that people find some value in it. You'll let me know. And always there. I'm always available to you, my
Thank you,
friend.
David. Thank you. And on that
You're
note,
welcome.
thanks for joining us, guys. We look forward to seeing you again next show. Take care. Bye.